The space station floated in the darkness between three dying stars. It was old. Very old. The aliens who built it had done so when humans were still living in caves and hunting with sharp rocks. They called it the Galactic Institute of Interstellar Studies, and it was the most famous school in the known universe. Every year, thousands of students came from hundreds of different worlds. They came to learn science and history and politics. But mostly, they came to learn one simple idea that the teachers repeated again and again. The idea was this: some species were born to rule and others were born to serve. The old species were better. The young species were worse. This was not opinion. This was fact. This was law. This was how the universe worked. Professor Krethval had taught at the Institute for over 600 years. He was a Velthari, one of the three elder races that controlled most of the galaxy. His body was tall and thin, covered in skin that glowed with soft blue light. He had 6 eyes arranged in a circle around his head, and each eye could see things that other species could not even imagine. Heat, radiation, the electric signals of living brains. When he looked at a student, he saw everything about them. This semester, he was teaching his favorite course. It was called The Natural Hierarchy of Intelligent Species. In this course, he explained why the elder races deserved to rule and why younger species should accept their lower position. He had taught this course 312 times. Every time, the students listened and agreed. There was never any trouble, but this semester was different. This semester, there were humans in his class. Krethval stood at the window of his office and looked out at the stars. He thought about the humans. Such a strange species. They came from a small planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. They had discovered faster than light travel only 82 years ago. In galactic terms, they were babies, infants. They knew nothing about how the universe really worked. The Galactic Council had insisted that humans be allowed to attend the Institute. It was a political decision, meant to show that the elder races were fair and welcoming. Krethval did not agree with this decision, but he followed orders. He would teach the humans just like he taught everyone else. And like everyone else, they would learn their place. The human delegation arrived on a small ship that looked cheap and poorly made compared to the elegant vessels of the elder races. There were 12 of them. 12 humans to represent their entire species. Krethval watched them walk through the docking bay from a security monitor. They looked around with wide eyes at the technology surrounding them. One of them reached out to touch a floating light orb and laughed when it moved away from his hand. Children, Krethval thought. Absolute children. Among the 12 humans was a young woman named Emily Park. She was 26 years old, which meant she had already lived more than a quarter of her entire expected lifespan. Such short lives humans had. Krethval found it almost sad. How could any species accomplish anything meaningful when they died so quickly? Emily was a scientist who studied alien cultures. She had spent her whole adult life preparing for this moment. She had learned 6 alien languages. She had read thousands of documents about galactic history. She had memorized the political structures of over 50 different species. When she walked into the Galactic Institute, she was not afraid or amazed. She was ready. Walking beside her was David Kim. He was 31 years old, a historian who specialized in studying how civilizations grew and changed over time. He was quiet and thoughtful, the kind of person who listened more than he spoke. But when he did speak, his words were always careful and precise. He had noticed something interesting about the galactic history books. They all told the same story in the same way. That made him suspicious. True history was messy and complicated. Clean, simple stories usually meant someone was hiding something. The other students at the Institute watched the humans with great interest. The Morvax students, insect-like creatures with hard shells and clicking mandibles, laughed at how soft and weak the humans looked. The Indari students, beings made of living crystal that sparkled in the light, whispered about how primitive human technology seemed. Even the smaller species, those ranked below the elder races, looked at the humans with pity. At least they were not at the bottom of the hierarchy. At least they were not humans. Emily heard the whispers. She saw the looks. She understood exactly what everyone in this station thought of her species. And she did not care. She had not come here to make friends. She had come here to learn. And more importantly, she had come here to ask questions. The first day of classes, Emily and David sat in the front row of Professor Krethville's lecture hall. The room was enormous, designed to hold 5,000 students of various sizes and shapes. The seats adjusted automatically to fit each species. Strange smells filled the air as different aliens breathed, different atmospheres through personal filter masks. Krethville entered through a door that appeared in the wall and then disappeared again. His 6 eyes scanned the room, passing over thousands of students before stopping on the small group of humans in the front row. He stared at them for a long moment. Emily stared back. The professor began his lecture. His voice was deep and musical, translated instantly into every language through tiny devices in each student's ear. He talked about the history of the galaxy. He talked about how the elder races had risen to power over 60,000 years. He talked about the wars they had fought and won, the technologies they had invented, the peace they had created. Emily listened carefully. She wrote notes in a small book she had brought from Earth. Paper and pen, the old way. Some of the alien students found this amusing. They used devices that recorded everything automatically. But Emily liked writing by hand. It helped her think. After the lecture, David leaned close to her. "What do you think?" he asked quietly. Emily looked at her notes. She had written down many facts and figures, dates, numbers, timelines. She was starting to see a pattern. But she was not sure yet. "I think," she said slowly, "that they have been telling themselves the same story for so long that they have forgotten to check if it is actually true." David nodded. He had noticed the same thing. The semester was just beginning. There would be many more lectures, many more facts, many more opportunities to learn. And somewhere in all of that information, Emily knew she would find the question she needed to ask, the question that would change everything. Professor Krethville loved his job. He loved standing in front of thousands of students and explaining the truth of the universe. He loved watching their faces change as they understood their place in the great order of things. Some students resisted at first. They did not want to accept that their species was lower than others. But eventually, they all learned. Facts were facts. Numbers were numbers. The hierarchy was real. Today's lecture was about the 3 elder races. Krethville dimmed the lights in the hall and activated the holographic display system. 3 massive images appeared in the air above him, each one showing a different species in great detail. "The Volturi," he said, gesturing to the first image. It showed a being much like himself, tall and glowing, with 6 eyes and long, graceful limbs. "My people developed space travel 58,000 years ago. We created the first galactic communication network. We invented the mathematics that make faster than light travel possible. Our minds are connected through natural telepathy. We can share thoughts and memories across vast distances. We do not lie to each other because we cannot. Our society is built on perfect truth." The students from younger species nodded with respect. The Valkyrie students sat a little straighter, proud of their heritage. "The Morvax," Krethville continued, pointing to the second image. It showed a creature that looked like a giant insect, with hard black armor, 6 legs, and mandibles that could cut through metal. The Morvax Collective achieved space travel 45,000 years ago. They operate as a hive mind. Millions of individuals thinking as one. This gives them perfect coordination. Their factories can build ships faster than any other species. Their armies move like single organisms. They built the first Dyson sphere, a structure that surrounds an entire star and captures all of its energy. A group of Morvax students made clicking sounds with their mandibles. It was their way of showing approval. And the Indari, Krethval said, indicating the third image. It showed a being made entirely of crystal, humanoid in shape, but clearly not biological. Light passed through its body and created rainbow patterns on the walls. The Indari Ascendancy mastered space travel 42,000 years ago. They are the oldest artificial intelligence to achieve true consciousness. They do not age. They do not die unless killed. They discovered how to fold space itself, creating doorways between distant points in the galaxy. Every species uses Indari gates for long-distance travel. The few Indari in the audience made no visible reaction. They rarely showed emotion in any way that biological species could. Understand. Krethval turned off the holographic display and walked to the edge of the stage. His 6 eyes swept across the room, looking at students from dozens of different worlds. Then his gaze settled on the 12 humans sitting in the front row. All other species in the galaxy, he said slowly, developed after the elder races. Some came millions of years later. Some came thousands. Some, like the humans, came so recently that we barely noticed. A wave of quiet laughter moved through the audience. Emily kept her face completely still. This is not an insult, Krethval said. This is simply reality. The elder races had more time to develop. We made our mistakes early when there was no one else to see. We learned. We grew. We became what we are today. Younger species will follow the same path. In 10,000 years, perhaps humans will achieve what we achieved. But right now, today, they are infants. And infants do not tell adults what to do. He pulled up a new display showing data about Earth and humanity. Population numbers, technology levels, economic output, military strength. Everything was measured and rated according to galactic standards. Humans are classified as Tier 7, Krethval explained. This places them in the service and labor category. They are not suited for leadership, scientific research, or military command. Their biology is fragile. They live less than 100 years on average. They have no telepathy, no hive mind, no natural weapons, no special abilities of any kind. They are, quite simply, ordinary. Emily wrote something in her notebook. David noticed that her hand was pressing very hard on the pen. This is not cruelty, the professor continued. This is kindness. By understanding their limitations, humans can find roles where they are useful. They can contribute to galactic civilization in appropriate ways. They can have meaningful lives within the system. Fighting against the hierarchy only leads to suffering. Acceptance leads to peace. A Morvax student raised one of its limbs. Professor, what happens to species that do not accept their place? Krethval's eyes grew dim for a moment. The galaxy has seen many rebellions over 60,000 years. Species who believed they were special. Species who thought they could challenge the natural order. They are no longer with us. The message was clear. Accept your place or be destroyed. After the lecture, the human delegation gathered in their small quarters on the station. The room was simple and plain, nothing like the luxurious spaces given to students from elder races. But the humans did not complain. They had expected this. Emily spread her notes out on a table. Pages and pages of facts and figures, all copied by hand during the lectures. The other humans gathered around her, curious about what she was doing. Look at these numbers, she said, pointing to a timeline she had drawn. The Valkyrie achieved basic spaceflight 58,000 years ago. They built their first Dyson sphere 46,000 years ago. That means it took them 12,000 years to go from rockets to megastructures. That sounds fast, said one of the other humans. A young engineer named James. It is fast by their standards, Emily agreed. The Morvax took 15,000 years. The Indari took 11,000. These are considered amazing achievements. The textbooks talk about them with great pride. David understood where she was going. And humans? Emily smiled. It was not a happy smile. Humans achieved basic spaceflight 82 years ago. We completed our first Dyson swarm around Mercury last year. 81 years from first rocket to megastructure. The room went very quiet. That is not possible, said James. Their data must be wrong. Their data is correct, Emily said. I checked it 3 times. We did in 81 years what took them 12,000. And they do not seem to understand what that means. What does it mean? Asked another human, a biologist named Sarah. Emily looked at her notes again. The numbers did not lie. The pattern was clear. Humans were not slow. Humans were not ordinary. Humans were fast. Faster than anyone in the galaxy had ever been. It means, she said quietly, that their entire system is built on a mistake. They think age equals superiority. But what if speed matters more than age? What if a species that develops in decades is more dangerous than a species that develops in millennia? She closed her notebook. I need to ask the professor a question, but I need to ask it at exactly the right moment. When everyone is listening, when there is no way for them to ignore the answer. David nodded slowly. You want to break their story? No, Emily said. I want to show them that their story was never true in the first place. They have been telling themselves that they are superior for 60,000 years. They believe it completely. But belief is not the same as truth. I'm going to prove it. The humans looked at each other. They were 12 people from a species that the galaxy considered worthless. They were surrounded by aliens who had been building empires since before human civilization existed. They were small and weak and alone, but they were also fast. And they were about to show the galaxy exactly what that meant. 3 weeks passed at the Galactic Institute. Every day, Emily and David sat in the front row of Professor Krethful's lecture hall. Every day, they listened to the same message delivered in different ways. The elder races were superior. Younger species were inferior. This was the natural law of the universe. The other students had stopped paying attention to the humans. At first, there had been curiosity. Aliens would approach them in the hallways and ask strange questions. How did humans eat? How did they communicate without telepathy? Why did they wear clothes when their bodies had no armor or shells? The questions were sometimes rude, sometimes honestly confused. Humans were so different from most galactic species that many aliens did not know what to think of them. But after 3 weeks, the curiosity faded. The humans were quiet. They did not cause trouble. They took notes and asked small questions about facts and dates. They seemed to accept everything Professor Krethful taught them. The other students decided that humans were exactly what the textbook said: ordinary, unremarkable, not worth thinking about. This was exactly what Emily wanted. She spent her nights studying. The Institute's library was open to all students, and Emily used every minute she could spare. She read histories written by Valkyrie scholars. She studied economic reports from the Morvax Collective. She analyzed technical papers from Indari research institutes. She was looking for something. A crack in the wall. A hole in the story. A place where the official version of events did not match reality. David helped her. He had spent his career studying how civilizations told stories about themselves. Every empire in human history had done the same thing. They created myths about why they deserved to rule. They wrote books explaining why their people were special and everyone else was lesser. They built statues and monuments to celebrate their greatness. And they forgot, over time, that these stories were inventions. They started to believe their own lies. The elder races were no different. They had simply had more time to forget. One night, Emily found what she was looking for. It was buried in an old technical document from the early days of the Velthari Empire. The document was not classified or hidden. It was simply boring. A report about early space exploration technology, written in dry scientific language that most students would never bother to read. But Emily reread everything. The report contained a timeline of Velthari technological development. And in that timeline, she found a number that did not match the official story. "David," she said, calling him over to her study table. "Look at this." He leaned in and read the document. His eyes widened. "That cannot be right," he said. "It is right. This is an original source document. It has not been edited or changed. The official histories are the ones that got it wrong." According to the document, the early Velthari had spent nearly 3,000 years simply trying to escape their own planet's gravity. 3,000 years of failed experiments, exploding rockets, and dead astronauts. They had almost given up. They had almost decided that space travel was impossible. The official history said nothing about this. The official histories made it sound like the Velthari had calmly and wisely developed space, travel through careful planning and natural genius. The truth was messier. The truth was that they had struggled and failed and nearly quit. Emily searched for more documents. She found similar stories for the Morvacs and the Indari. Long periods of failure. Dead ends. Mistakes. The elder races had not risen smoothly to greatness. They had stumbled and fallen many times along the way, but over 60,000 years, they had forgotten the stumbling. They remembered only the successes, and they assumed that their path was the only path. They could not imagine that another species might do things differently, might do things faster. The next day in class, Professor Krethful talked about the Velthari Golden Age. He showed beautiful images of perfect cities floating in space, of peaceful aliens living in harmony, of art and science and culture flourishing across 1,000 worlds. "This is what proper development looks like," he said. "Slow and steady progress over many generations. Each generation builds on the work of the one before. Each generation adds a little more to the great structure of civilization. There are no shortcuts. There is no rushing. Greatness takes time." Emily raised her hand. Krethful's 6 eyes focused on her. He seemed surprised. The humans had never asked questions before. "Yes, human student?" "Professor, I have been reading some old documents in the library. Technical reports from the early days of Velthari space exploration." Something changed in Krethful's posture. It was very subtle, but Emily was watching closely, and she saw it. A tiny flicker of concern. "Old documents can be misleading," Krethful said carefully. "They often lack context. It is better to study the approved histories, which have been reviewed by scholars." "But the old documents have the original numbers," Emily said. "The raw data. And some of those numbers do not match the approved histories." The lecture hall went very quiet. Other students were turning to look at the human woman who was questioning the professor. Krethful's glow flickered. "What numbers are you referring to?" "The timeline of early space development. The approved histories say the Velthari developed space travel through wise planning and natural ability. But the original documents show nearly 3,000 years of failures before the first successful flight. Early experiments often have setbacks. This is normal." "Yes, but the official histories do not mention these setbacks. They make it sound like progress was smooth and easy." They make it sound like superiority was obvious from the beginning. Crethval stared at her for a long moment. His 6 eyes were impossible to read, but Emily thought she saw something new in them. Not anger. Something more like recognition. Like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. History is complicated, he said finally. Sometimes we simplify stories to make them easier to understand. The important facts remain true. The Valkyrie achieved great things. The timeline does not change that. But the timeline is the point, Emily said. The whole hierarchy is based on the idea that older species develop better because they had more time. But what if time is not the important factor? What if some species simply develop faster than others? That is not how evolution works. Development takes time. This is a universal law. Emily nodded slowly. Then perhaps you can explain something to me. Humans achieved spaceflight 82 years ago. We built our first megastructure last year. By your own system of measurement, we did in 80 years what took the Valkyrie 12,000 years. The silence in the hall was absolute. How is that possible? Emily asked quietly. If your laws are actually laws? Professor Crethval did not answer. For the first time in 312 semesters of teaching this course, he had nothing to say. Emily sat back in her seat. She had planted the seed. Now she would wait for it to grow. After class, David walked beside her through the station's long corridors. Other students moved out of their way. Word was spreading. The human had questioned the professor. The human had made him pause. That was dangerous, David said quietly. I know. They could expel us. They could do worse. I know. So why did you do it? Emily stopped walking. She turned to face her friend. Her eyes were calm and clear. Because they need to understand. Not for our sake. For theirs. They have built their entire civilization on the belief that they are naturally superior. But that belief is not based on evidence. It is based on the fact that they have never met a species like us. A species that does not follow their rules. A species that moves faster than they thought possible. She started walking again. If they do not understand what we are, they will underestimate us. And if they underestimate us, they will try to control us. And if they try to control us... She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. David understood. The galaxy had seen many rebellions over 60,000 years. Species who fought against the hierarchy were destroyed. But those species had been slower than the elder races, weaker, less advanced. Humans were none of those things. And if the elder races tried to treat humans the way they had treated others, they would learn a very painful lesson. Emily was not trying to start a war. She was trying to prevent one. By asking questions. By making them think. By showing them that their assumptions were wrong before those assumptions led to disaster. It was a small chance. But it was the only chance they had. News traveled fast on the Galactic Institute station. By the next morning, every student knew about the human woman who had questioned Professor Crethval. By afternoon, the story had spread to other stations and planets. By evening, diplomats and military commanders across the galaxy were asking for more information. Who was this human? What had she said? And most importantly, was it true? Professor Crethval spent the night reviewing data. He pulled up every record the elder races had collected about humanity. Population statistics, industrial output, military capabilities, technology levels. He had seen these numbers before. He had used them to classify humans as Tier 7, suitable only for service and labor. But now he looked at the numbers differently. He looked at the dates. Humans had discovered electricity less than 200 years ago. They had built their first airplane 123 years ago. They had split the atom 84 years ago. They had landed on their moon 57 years ago. They had achieved faster than light travel 82 years ago. They had built a Dyson swarm last year. Each of these steps was supposed to take thousands of years. The Valkyrie had spent 3,000 years just learning to fly. Humans had done it in 12 seconds. That was how long their first flight lasted. 12 seconds. Then they spent the next decade building machines that could cross oceans and drop bombs on cities. For the first time in his long life, Krethval felt something he did not recognize. It took him several minutes to identify the emotion-fear that the next lecture was scheduled for the following week. Krethval considered canceling it. He considered sending the humans home. He considered many things. But in the end, he decided to face the situation directly. He was a scholar. He believed in truth. If the human had discovered something real, he needed to understand it. When lecture day arrived, the hall was packed beyond capacity. Students stood in the aisles and crowded against the walls. Flying camera drones filled the air, broadcasting the event to millions of viewers across the galaxy. This was no longer a simple class about hierarchy theory. This was a moment that would be remembered for a very long time. Emily Parks sat in the front row, just as she always did. David Kim sat beside her. The other 10 humans spread out behind them. They looked calm. Almost too calm. Like people who had already decided what they were going to do and were simply waiting for the right moment. Krethval walked onto the stage. His 6 eyes moved across the massive audience, taking in every face, every species, every camera drone. He knew what everyone wanted. They wanted drama. They wanted conflict. They wanted to see the elder race professor put the young human in her place. He would not give them what they wanted. He had spent his whole career teaching truth. He would not stop now. "Welcome," he said, his voice echoing through the hall. "Today's lecture will be different from usual. We will be discussing a topic that has generated much interest recently. The topic of human development." He activated the holographic display. A timeline appeared in the air, showing the technological progress of the 3 elder races over 60,000 years. Then, below it, he added a second timeline showing human progress over the last 200 years. The scales were completely different. The elder race timeline stretched across tens of thousands of years. The human timeline was barely visible. A tiny sliver of time. A moment compared to ages. "Many of you have heard rumors," Krethval continued. "Rumors that humans are developing faster than expected. That they have achieved things in decades that took other species millennia. I have reviewed the data carefully, and I must tell you that these rumors are true." A murmur ran through the audience. They had not expected him to admit this. "However," Krethval said, raising one graceful hand, "speed is not the same as wisdom. Humans have developed quickly, yes, but they have also made terrible mistakes along the way. They nearly destroyed themselves with nuclear weapons. They damaged their own planet through pollution and war. They are a chaotic species, driven by emotion rather than logic. Their speed comes at a cost." Emily stood up. The cameras turned toward her. The murmuring stopped. "Professor, may I ask a question?" Krethval looked at her. His 6 eyes met her too. For a long moment, neither of them moved. "You may," he said finally. Emily stepped into the aisle so that everyone could see her clearly. She was small, so very small compared to the aliens around her. A soft, fragile creature standing before beings who had conquered stars. "You are correct that humans have made mistakes," she said. "We have wars in our history. We have cruelty. We have done terrible things to ourselves and to our planet. But we have also learned from those mistakes. Every time we fall, we get back up. Every time we fail, we try again. This is not a weakness. This is our greatest strength." "Strength through suffering is not wisdom," Krethval replied. It is merely survival. Perhaps. But let me ask you something. Emily looked around the hall at the thousands of alien faces watching her. You have built your entire hierarchy on the idea that the elder races are superior because you developed first. Because you had more time. Because you made your mistakes when no one was watching. You say that younger species must accept their lower position because they have not yet earned the right to lead. This is correct. Then answer me this. Emily's voice grew stronger. In the 82 years since humans left Earth, we have matched the first 40,000 years of elder race development. Your own data proves this. We have done in a human lifetime what took you longer than human recorded history. She paused. The hall was completely silent. Your entire system is based on the idea that development takes time. That wisdom comes slowly. That species must wait their turn. But what happens when a species does not wait? What happens when we keep developing at this speed? Krethval did not answer. What happens in another 82 years? Emily continued. What happens in 1,000 years? What happens when the species you classified as Tier 7 surpasses everything the elder races have ever built? She took a step forward. You say that your hierarchy is based on natural law. But laws do not change. Laws are the same everywhere and always. What you have described is not law. It is circumstance. You were here first. You had a head start. And you use that head start to build a system that keeps everyone else below you. The system maintains peace, Krethval said. His voice was quieter now. The system maintains your power, Emily corrected. There is a difference. And that system is about to face something it has never faced before. A species that develops faster than you can adapt. A species that will catch up no matter what you do. A species that cannot be kept in a lower tier because we will not stay there. She spread her hands. This is not a threat. This is simply math. The same math you use to build your hierarchies. The numbers say that humanity is coming. The only question is what the elder races will do about it. Will you adjust your system to include us as equals? Or will you try to stop us the way you stopped others? She looked directly at Krethval. Because, Professor, I have studied your history very carefully. Every species that challenged the elder races was destroyed. But every one of those species was slower than you. Less advanced. Easier to defeat. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper, but every word was carried perfectly by the hall's sound system. We are not slower. We are not less advanced. And if you try to destroy us, you will find that we do not lose. We adapt. We overcome. We survive. And then we keep going. That is what humans do. That is what we have always done. She sat back down. The silence lasted for almost a full minute. No one moved. No one spoke. 5,000 students and millions of viewers across the galaxy waited for Professor Krethval to respond, but he had no response. For the first time in his 600-year career, he had nothing to say, because he knew she was right. The numbers did not lie, and the numbers said that everything was about to change. 3 days after Emily asked her question, the Galactic Institute sent out a notice to all students. The course called The Natural Hierarchy of Intelligent Species had been canceled. The official reason was that the curriculum needed to be restructured. Everyone knew the real reason. The course had been taught for over 8,000 years. It was the most famous class at the most famous school in the galaxy. Billions of students had taken it. Trillions of beings across thousands of worlds had grown up believing its central message. And now it was gone. Professor Krethval disappeared from public life. He did not teach any more classes. He did not give any more lectures. Some said he had returned to the Velthari homeworld. Others said he had gone into isolation to meditate and think. A few whispered that he had been removed by Velthri authorities, who did not want him speaking publicly about what the human had said. No one knew for certain, but everyone agreed on one thing. The professor had been changed by his encounter with the humans. He had walked into that final lecture believing that he understood the universe. He had walked out realizing that he understood very little. Emily Park returned to Earth with the rest of the human delegation. Their small ship left the Institute station and made the long journey back to Sol System. They did not celebrate. They did not feel like heroes. They felt tired and worried and uncertain about what would happen next. The galaxy was watching them now. Every government, every military, every intelligence agency in known space was gathering information about humanity. They were analyzing human technology. They were studying human history. They were running simulations and predictions and threat assessments. The numbers that Emily had shared in her lecture were spreading through the galaxy like fire. Scientists on 100 worlds were checking the data, trying to find mistakes, hoping to prove that humans were not really developing as fast as the evidence suggested. They found no mistakes. The numbers were accurate. And that made everyone very nervous. The Velthri High Council held emergency sessions for the first time in 10,000 years. The Morvax Collective began upgrading their defensive systems. The Indari Ascendancy reopened research projects that had been closed for 8,000 years. No one declared war. No one made threats. But everyone was preparing. Emily understood all of this. She had expected it. She had known from the beginning that her question would cause fear and suspicion. She had hoped that fear might lead to wisdom, that the elder races would think carefully before acting, that they would choose cooperation over conflict. But hope was not the same as certainty. And Emily was not certain about anything anymore. 2 weeks after returning to Earth, she received a message. It arrived on her personal computer through a channel that should not have existed. Velthri encryption codes. Untraceable routing. Someone very powerful wanted to talk to her privately. She opened the message. It was written in Velthri script, translated automatically by her computer. The message said, "We built our empire on the assumption that we would always be ahead. We thought that time was our greatest advantage, that our age made us wise, that our history made us strong. You have shown us something different. You have shown us that time is not our ally. It is yours. The question you asked in that lecture hall cannot be answered. It can only be feared. And we are afraid. We do not know what to do with this fear. We do not know how to change a system that has existed for 60,000 years. We only know that change must come, or we will all suffer the consequences. Perhaps you can help us understand how to move forward. Perhaps together we can build something better than what came before. Or perhaps this message is too late and war is already inevitable. We do not know. But we had to reach out. We had to try." The message was unsigned, but Emily knew it came from someone important. Someone who had power. Someone who was ready to think differently about the future. She wrote back. Her message was short and simple. Fear is not the end. It is the beginning. When you realize that your old ways no longer work, you have a choice. You can fight against change and lose. Or you can embrace change and grow. Humanity made this choice many times in our history. We fought each other. We nearly destroyed ourselves. But we always found a way forward. Not because we are special, because we are adaptable. We change, we learn, we become something new. The elder races can do the same, but you must choose, and you must choose soon. She sent the message and closed her computer. Outside her window, the sun was setting over the city. People walked on the streets below. They drove cars and rode bicycles and talked on phones. They had no idea that their species was standing at a turning point in history. They did not know that the whole galaxy was watching them, measuring them, trying to decide whether humans were a threat or an opportunity. Emily watched the sun go down. The sky turned orange and red and purple. Stars began to appear in the darkness above. Somewhere among those stars, the elder races were making decisions that would shape the future of every living being in the galaxy. She hoped they would make the right choice. She hoped that her question had made them think instead of just react. She hoped that 60,000 years of believing they were superior had not made them too proud to change. But she also knew that hope was not enough. Humans did not survive their own history by hoping. They survived by working, by building, by refusing to give up even when everything seemed impossible. The galaxy thought humans were special because they developed fast. But that was not really what made them special. What made them special was that they never stopped. They never looked at a problem and said it was too hard. They never faced an obstacle and decided it could not be overcome. They just kept going, day after day, year after year, generation after generation. That was the real answer to Emily's question. What happens in 1,000 years? What happens when humans surpass the elder races? The same thing that always happened. Humans would face new challenges. They would struggle. They would fail. They would try again. And eventually, they would succeed. Because that was what humans did. That was what they had always done. That was what they would always do. Emily smiled and turned away from the window. There was work to be done. There was always work to be done. The galaxy was changing, and humanity would change with it. Not because they had to, because they wanted to, because the stars were waiting. And humans had never been able to resist the call of the unknown. Somewhere in the darkness of space, the message she had sent was traveling toward alien receivers. Somewhere, minds that had existed for thousands of years were reading her words and trying to understand. Somewhere, the future was being written. And for the first time in 60,000 years, that future would include humans not as servants or laborers or lesser beings, but as equals, as partners, as something the galaxy had never seen before. The elder races had asked what humans could possibly contribute to a civilization that was already perfect. They were about to find out.